I think there's a stigma, and we'll get into that for a second. But the other day I was smoking a joint, okay, outside of my place. I was doing some work. I went outside to smoke. My mom came out and she said, that's a disgusting smell. And I was like, is that a disgusting smell to you because it smells bad? Or does it smell trouble? Do you associate it with some sort of trouble, stigma in your childhood, some sort of experience and these things? She couldn't answer, right? Because actually cannabis smells pretty damn good, right? It's a beautiful plant, and depending on, the flower profile and things like that. I've always loved and appreciated cannabis for what it does to me, and what it does to me is unlocks different features and functionality, a toolkit in me that is in there. It just helps get it out, which is that creative toolkit, that calm toolkit, that health toolkit, right? Okay, hi, I'm Shahbaaz. Sounds, interesting because I never really say my name like that. I say Shahbaaz, but either way. And currently I'm the managing director of Kind, which is a media and events and lifestyle company. And I'm just really excited to be here and very honored and privileged.
Thank you so much, Shahbaaz, for coming in. We are at the O Cannabis conference right now. You are like one of the industry leaders here in Canada and maybe across the world, because Canada is basically leading cannabis across the world. Just like this conference, you've been to so many of them. Where do you see cannabis going right now, like from the global perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a good question, and I don't know about the industry leader piece, but I will say that I've been very lucky to be here at the birth of legalization from 4 years ago. I made a quip on stage just a few moments ago in a panel that was, we get to sit here and talk about cannabis. You're from India, ancestrally I'm from India. So much of the world isn't even a percent of the way into what we're talking about, and we're not even a percent away into what needs to be uncovered. And so the fact that Canada can be leaders and Canada can be here first, and we took the plunge, the education that we get, the content, the things that you're bringing to the people. I mean, this is effectively like seeing the future, right? I think the challenge for us in Canada is there's no playbook, right? Other countries can follow that playbook, that legalization framework. They can learn from our mistakes. And so it's upon us to try and illuminate those and build a better future. So as far as like where global cannabis is going, I think three main pieces. Number one, cannabis is a medicine first and foremost. Canada wouldn't have legalized if it wasn't for medicine and that whole movement around cannabis, in 2013 and from years before that. So cannabis will continue to be researched and be a medicine, because that's what cannabis is first and foremost. Number two, I think that we're going to start to see a rise of large and mass consumerism as things like CBD, although it's a buzzword, take form, and normalization happens, and that comes from Canada. And number three, I think we're going to start to see the rise of talent, because if you can survive in cannabis, if you can build a new industry, you have to have something that is like you can't teach, and that is like a combination of like the Venn diagram of like self-awareness, intelligence, and like compete level. And so I think this industry, being in it, breeds some of the best talent, because if you can make it here, I strongly believe you can make it anywhere.
Honestly, with the amount of regulations that we have, I just realized working in retail is so much more difficult than being at other retail places.
Absolutely.
Be it convenience store, restaurants, whatever, right? It's so much more easier being a person, a cashier, whatever, there instead of being here. Let's take a step back and let's talk about how you got into cannabis in the first place. What was your first experiences like?
Vipin, I gotta say, it's so awesome because you're such a good host. Normally I'm on the other side of this, right? I'm asking the questions, so to be asked the questions in such an eloquent way like you do, it's really cool. I'm really excited to see what you continue to do in the future. But what was the question?
How did you get into cannabis, and what were your initial experiences?
Okay, so how I got into cannabis is very interesting. Let me start with, and I'll be concise and I'll walk through it, but it's a good story. So my parents are originally from East Africa, from Nairobi, ancestrally from India, from Gujarat. So I grew up speaking Gujarati and understanding Swahili. I grew up in a house of 13 people. Okay, my parents from Nairobi. My dad was a professional cricket player. So and my mom's very religious. We're of the Ismaili Muslim religion. And so growing up in my household, it was religion, sports, and education. Okay, those were the three main anchor points. Right. I grew up with my dadi, my grandma in my house. You know, she was the first one to, you know, give me alcohol. Alcohol was very normalized in my place. You know, cricket players after big wins, you know, I'm sure you know, right?
Yeah.
So my dad was a wicket keeper. He has 3 bros. That's where and how I grew up in Canada. But, you know, the challenge is that one of my uncles, he is an alcoholic. And, you know, anytime he would consume cannabis, it would be the bangi is making him, you know, crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's the weed that's making him crazy, not the alcohol, but the weed was actually steadying him up, right? I didn't understand that growing up. I really didn't. It's not really until I started to understand alcohol and just how you could lose your everything with alcohol that, you know, I started to say, hey, let me understand this a little bit more. At the same time, in high school, you know, I was learning about weed. You could get it from dealers, but you didn't have any of what this consumer buying mentality is, and that's why we're so lucky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, India,
Yeah.
right? Like, could you just buy weed from a dealer growing up? Or, like,
No, you're basically outing this out, and my family sees this, they're gonna kill me. But you can go like, you have to go to like deep places to buy something.
Yeah.
And it's shit. Like
it's shit. You don't know what's in it. It's
yeah.
unsafe to get into the car with somebody,
Yep.
right? And so, you know, my thing was if I could just maintain my good grades, my athletic nature, and I would go to Kane, I would go to religion, you know, and be religious. I could appease my parents, and then, you know, I could essentially do what I wanted. I grew up I grew up in Ajax, in a suburb of Toronto, and in Pickering, and, you know, then I went to Western. Okay, and previous to me going to Western, I used to get drug tested all the time as a you know, as an athlete, as a soccer player, because we were playing at a high level for Ontario, for Canada, these types of things, and I was definitely against cannabis.
Yeah.
Definitely against. My mom, you know, I was a good boy. My mom was like, don't smoke that shit. And I didn't. But alcohol, you know, I was experimenting with alcohol, right? I had some bad experiences with alcohol, right? And then you go to university, and that's when I went to Western. I was playing a little bit of soccer. And what happened was I started to understand that if I consumed a little cannabis in the right manner, maybe cannabis could, you know, do a couple of things. Number one, maybe it could help me relax a little bit. It could foster my creativity on the field.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of this, non-athletic related, more school related, is in school everyone is taking Adderall, right? I'm sure that's you know, well known. If it's not well known, now you know. Trying to stay awake, trying to study, right? Now the world knows. Not me though, because you know, I still have a commitment to my health, right? Which is funny because alcohol is not that; it's the opposite. But it's been so normalized, right? But I still have a commitment to my health, and I didn't want to take Adderall, and so I started to consume some cannabis, and I started to learn about how my endocannabinoid system worked. Okay. So then I started to learn about cannabis, and then I went broke. Okay, I was working at Winners, right? The 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. shift, right? Before class, I was spending money. I was on OSAP, and then I started to learn about economics. My degree's in finance, and I applied that economics to me dealing. My parents now know this. So my mom's going to watch this. My dad's going to know this. But I did deal, and I dealt to a very niche type of consumer, right? And I was buying in small quantities, selling in small quantities, really maximizing my margins. But that's where I learned a lot. But when I think about carrying some of that weed in my car back then, my life could be completely different, right? Because that's the fundamental problem of this plant. It's been so demonized and wrongfully people are being incarcerated that now all of a sudden we get to talk about legal weed, but what about all those different people? And my life could have been different. Now my life's in weed. So really quickly to finish that story, I've always loved and appreciated cannabis for what it does to me. And what it does to me is unlocks different features and functionality, a toolkit in me that is in there. It just helps, you know, get it out, which is that creative toolkit, that calm toolkit, that health toolkit, right? And so what started to happen was I started to enjoy it, I started to learn about it, and I started to want to pursue it. But at the same time, we go back to where I was, you know, early on in my life, which was get good grades, right? Go into a blue chip company, make some money. So I went to Salesforce, okay? And I was there for 7 years as a sales rep and a manager. And I also co-founded the Canadian beach soccer team. In all of those times, alcohol was prominent, But if you smoked a joint, you was a no-no, right?
Yeah.
And so I had to very much hide it until one day I said, I don't need to hide this anymore. It's becoming normalized, right? It's my medicine. It's a medicine. We need to learn more about it. And the problem is there's no research. So what happened was I was going to stay at Salesforce for a very long time, and the opportunity of Canadian legalization popped open.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I went to be the head of sales at Lift & Co., which was a fantastic company. Lift & Co. Created Cancel, which is now mandated by every single bud tender.
Yeah.
I was part of that. We had, created lots of events where lots of relationships were built. We threw cannabis galas. We did all sorts of different things. And then I went to Dutchy, and now I'm at Kind. And let me pause there for a second. Dutchy's an incredible company, raised $600 million. They have the most visionary leaders, Ross Lipson, Zach Lipson. I learned a ton there about e-commerce, about technology, about focus. And they're really bringing accessibility to the industry. And then for the last 3 months, I've been the managing director at Kind. But just to sum it all up, and sorry for talking so much, that's the journey. And the cool thing is that everyone has relationships to cannabis.
Yeah.
And so, I've never been asked that, but that's my relationship to cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, that was amazing. It's maybe long, but so much more detail and an insight as to how you got into cannabis. Another big thing is so many people have like personal stories with cannabis, and nobody has anything with alcohol except being, this one in my family had alcohol issues, this one in my family got like cancer because of alcohol, all of those things. So I think cannabis is much more of a personal plant, obviously because people had to hide it, so they have different experience with it. My first experience, like I keep telling all the time, was with my grandfather. He was making like a drink with cannabis, which is like prevalent in India, called bhang. Which not a lot of people know about. Like when I got into retail here, people thought bhang was just a chocolate that a company makes here in the North America.
Jamie Pearson will be at Cotton Cannabis Week actually giving a speech, so that's funny.
Yeah, but like bhang has like a rich history on India, and even though cannabis got criminalized there, bhang was the only thing which government kept out of it. So it has a lot of cultural and religious significance, which I think would help India become a much more like accepting country in terms of cannabis in future. What do you think about like you said, how Canada got started in medical side? Do you think that's the way to go for other countries too?
So let me that's such a good point. So the other day I was smoking. I think there's a stigma, and we'll get into that for a second, but the other day I was smoking a joint, outside of my place. I was doing some work. I went outside to smoke. My mom came out and she said, that's a disgusting smell. And I was like, is that a disgusting smell to you because it smells bad? Or does it smell trouble? Do you associate it with some sort of trouble, stigma in your childhood, some sort of experience and these things? She couldn't answer, right? Because actually cannabis smells pretty damn good, right? It's a beautiful plant, and depending on, the flower profile and things like that. And so what I'd say to that is the number one hardest thing to do is to get people in a place where they're ready and willing to not even ready to change their mind, but willing to change their mind. And all the pre-work you have to do this, you're doing the pre-work. Yeah. This is the pre-work. Hopefully people see us that like we're not lazy stoners and stigma. It's like we're out here. You have this setup, right? You have, an amazing family and we're here. And it's like, so I think it's how do you get to a place where people are willing to actually be willing to listen and change their mind. And I think for a place like India, you got guys like Hemp Street doing some amazing things, right? And like you got some real thought leaders. So it's content, and it's also creating community within that where people can feel safe enough to ask questions and try things. From a medicinal perspective, there needs to be a lot more research in terms of utility, and doctors and pharmacists need to be educated a lot deeper, and they need to have access to that information. And that's the only way a medical program continues to go. But I mean, from a Canadian perspective, we had an amazing medical program. We still do, but it kind of got put in the back burner from a recreational perspective. And now as a medical patient, it's almost like harder to buy cannabis than it is for on the recreational side, right? So
you got to go online. Most people are like on the older age group for medical. They might know how to use websites and stuff. But just talking about India again, Bombay Hemp Company was kind of the first one who got started in India, and they would get like dumb questions which are valid because those are questions by consumers. Like they would make hemp clothes, and people would ask, would I get in trouble because I'm leaving India because it's made of cannabis? Can they detect all of those things? it's nothing. It's just a plant. It's a plant stock. But yeah.
The other day I was at the United Nations in New York with my dad actually.
Yeah.
Right. And the topic was cannabis and hemp as a pivotal good for environmental sustainable development goals.
Yeah.
And they paired that to the United Nations. Okay.
Yeah.
And so hemp is an incredible material. It's an incredible thing.
Yeah.
This plant is an incredible thing, and the use cases for it are amazing. And it's just again rooted in that stigma. And I mean, those sound like stupid questions now, but are they? No,
Yeah.
absolutely right, absolutely not. And so here's my question to like the world: why were we never taught about the endocannabinoid system?
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
Why was that never in anything
Yeah.
that I've ever learned?
Yeah.
Right?
Even when I was talking to Anita, she's a pharmacist here in BC. They were never taught anything about cannabis in their school. They have to learn something else again. So what's the point of learning about cannabis, it being medically legal, but they don't teach people who are going to be prescribing it?
Yeah. It's juxtaposition. It's like saying like, you know, I don't even, it's like saying here's this laptop, but you can't talk about it, you can't see it, you don't know what it does.
Yeah.
But you're expected to use it,
Use
right?
it, yeah.
So I think like back to India, it's like what India can do is create a board. I'm sure they have this already. Lots of different think tanks, but like a true think tank that aligns all the entities that need to be part of this conversation, from a government, a policy, a private, a ground level, a cultural level perspective, and create this think tank and actually seek to build education that incentivizes. Right now, cannabis in Canada is legal, but it's so disincentivized that it's like an absolute puzzle to try and like learn. Like, I'm a cannabis consumer. I work every day in this industry, and I'm so confused about certain things, right?
Yeah.
But that not to say that like everything's gonna be perfect. We have a legal industry, but a lot of countries can take a lot of good things from what we've done and do them better.
Yeah. I see so many people looking up to Canada, even just talking about Indians also. Maybe Canada is a destination just because it's immigrant friendly, but so many people have started coming here because and only to work in cannabis.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I said this before also, but you just have to be grateful that this plant is here. There are like 5,000-10,000 people coming here in 2-3 days and talking, discussing, smoking the plant, all in the open.
Tengo mucho agradecido, which is like I have a lot of gratitude for Canada, obviously. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Canada.
Yeah.
I'd be toiling away in tech somewhere. Canada took the leadership position. We've done some things really right. We've had some challenges. What matters is that we open the conversation, and that's what matters, and that's what you're doing here today, right? What's interesting and crazy about that is that like the world is about to explode, right? And a lot of things are about to happen in global cannabis. And what Canada really does is it does two things. It becomes an innovation center where you can start to learn about different retail models, different supply chain pieces, different selling techniques, business models, etc. Number one, it becomes an innovation center where if you're a company, if you can put it into this constraints and work in the ambiguity and succeed, you're set up. Number two, it becomes a breeding and a huge hub for knowledge capital.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you work in the Canadian industry, you can go into other countries, into the cannabis industry, because you've seen the future.
Yeah.
If you speak another language and you speak a native tongue, if you speak Urdu, Hindi, if you speak Spanish, if you speak Italian, like these, and you've seen Canada, like you're in such a prime position to succeed in life and in this industry. And so it's a knowledge capital breeding ground. Sure.
I second that, because I started my podcast during the pandemic, talked to so many people, like great people, but never really got to understand much because I never saw any product, maybe on the internet. But as soon as I started working here, that's why I took the break and not do this podcast, because there's so much more knowledge that I could get. Like now, Blue Dream as a strain didn't mean anything back home in India, but now it means so much. Terpenes, I used to keep talking about terpenes all the time. Never really knew what it was because never seen it, never. Let me ask you.
So you're you're doing an awesome thing. I got mad love, mad support. I told you how humbled I am to be on here. Like, how did you get started in cannabis? Like, growing up in India. Like, tell us about your journey if we have some time.
Yeah. So like I mentioned like quite a times now, I got first experience was with my grandfather. He was drinking bhang with his friend.
Yep.
Never knew it was cannabis.
But deeper into like, I know those are like the early days, but like
Yeah,
deeper
yeah,
into
yeah.
like, how did you start to create like content or want to
Yeah.
create content and want to be this host and want to bring knowledge to people? Like, where does that drive come from? Like, is it that moment with your grandpa? You know, is that kind of or like what is like, I guess, you know, what's fueling that journey is
Yep.
a better question.
So I actually dropped out of college, went into like on a boys trip in Kasol.
Does your mom know that you dropped out of college?
Yeah, had to tell my parents because in India parents have to pay the fees. So it's
Yeah.
like
You
had-
dropped out of college. In case you're watching.
I dropped out of college, went to Kasol. It's in the northern part of India. It's very famous, like touristy thing for smoking weed, mostly hash over there. Went there, saw so much. I went on the internet saying, oh, is there anything related to cannabis in India? Saw what Bombay Hemp Company was doing. I was like, shit. Like at that time, that was the biggest like eye opener for me. I'm like, someone is doing so much, even though now it seems so little. They're selling clothes made of hemp. But at that time, it's like nobody knew what hemp was. That's how I got started. Went back to college again and started like a small business project on hemp clothing. It was an amazing like opportunity for me to learn more about cannabis and show it to my teachers. Like they're 50-year-old like teachers that don't never smokes cannabis, always like keep catching students doing it but never done it ever. And when I showed them the t-shirts, they were like so excited about it. So honestly, I was looking for something to get into, and when I saw people getting excited about a t-shirt, that's when I was like, oh, there's more in this.
You say something really interesting there. I think the challenge for me, okay, so I didn't come from CPG, consumer packaged goods.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that, you know, coffee can do all these different things and be ground into all these different things. And you could, you know, I didn't understand how bars of soap got on shelves or anything like that, right? And I think the biggest misconception, to your point, your story right here about hemp, is that like people can't make the connection between what like the cannabis as a plant and this thing that you roll up
Yeah.
and you smoke in a joint that makes you high, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't understand the use cases for hemp. They don't understand the use case for the plant, and you know how you can, you know, start to isolate different compounds and, you know, achieve certain desired, you know, form factors and things like that. So it's really it's that connection, right? That bridging that. It's, you know, they were like, what is that? And then
Yeah, exactly. Now, I think hemp is taking that a lot. Now, there's like hemp hearts, hemp seeds that you can buy in India. That's one of the ways people are getting into it. And now, because of that, and Ayurveda also, like people know what bhang is. So, like you were talking about people having especially in North America, they're not having any education on cannabis. At least in India, in like the older texts, there's something that mentions about bhang.
Yeah.
So, because of that, there's just people. Tens of thousands of doctors that at least know there's a compound which goes into medicine which people can eat. So especially where I come from in my city Indore, it's legal to sell bhang as a medicine. So that access is still there, and that's what Hemp Street is also doing. They got so many people and doctors involved without any like modernized knowledge that they can let's take it from there.